Let me tell you about myself. I'm Heather Morris, the author of The Tattooist of Auschwitz and Silke's Journey, and being released this coming September, Stories of Hope. I'm having to talk to you today from a studio with one other person. He's behind the camera. I have to be talking to you this way because, well, you know why. Our world has changed, and we're now required to only come to you down the lens of a camera. I've chosen a book today to read to you because it means an awful lot to me, and I know it will to many of you who have read it, and I know you've read it in your millions too. It's by the previous First Lady of the United States of America, Becoming Michelle Obama. My first solo campaign event took place in early April inside a modest home in Des Moines. A few dozen people had collected in the living room, sitting on couches and folding chairs that had been brought in for the occasion, while others sat cross-legged on the floor. As I scanned the room preparing to speak, what I observed probably shouldn't have surprised me, but it did, a little at least. Laid out on the end tables were the same sort of white crocheted doilies that my grandmother Shields used to have in her house. I spotted porcelain figurines that looked just like the ones Robbie had kept on her shelves downstairs from us on Euclid Avenue. A man in the front row was smiling at me warmly. I was in Iowa, but I had the distinct feeling of being at home. Iowans, I was realizing, were like Shieldses and Robinsons. They didn't suffer fools. They didn't trust people who put on airs. They could sniff out a phony a mile away. My job, I realized, was to be myself, to speak as myself, and so I did. Let me tell you about me. I'm Michelle Obama. Raised on the south side of Chicago in a little apartment on the top floor of a 2-story house that felt a lot like this one. My dad was a water pump operator for the city. My mom stayed at home to raise my brother and me. I talked about everything, about my brother and the values we were raised with, and about this hotshot lawyer I had met at work, the guy who'd stolen my heart with his groundedness and his vision for the world, the man who left his socks lying around the house that morning and sometimes snored in his sleep. I told them about how I was keeping my job at the hospital, about how my mother was picking our girls up from school that day. I didn't sugarcoat my feelings about politics. The political world was no place for good people, I said, explaining how I'd been conflicted about whether Barack should run at all, worried about what the spotlight might do to our family. But I was standing before them because I believed in my husband and what he could do. I knew how much he read and how deeply he thought about things. I said that he was exactly the kind of smart, decent president I would choose for this country, even if selfishly I'd have rather kept him closer to home all these years. As weeks went by, I'd tell the same story in Davenport, Cedar Rapids, Council Bluffs, in Sioux City, Marshalltown, Muscatine, in bookstores, union halls, a home for aging military veterans. And as the weather warmed up, on front porches and in public parks, the more I told my story, the more my voice settled into itself. I liked my story. I was comfortable telling it. And I was telling it to people who, despite the difference in skin color, reminded me of my family. Postal workers who had bigger dreams, just as Dandy once had. Civic-minded piano teachers like Robbie. Stay-at-home moms who were active in the PTA like my mother. Blue-collar workers who do anything for their families, just like my dad. I didn't need to practice or use notes. I said only what I sincerely felt. And what I sincerely feel at this time is that we can and we will get through this pandemic that we know is COVID-19. Stay safe. Thank you.